Well, a good morning to everybody. How are you doing? Happy Friday. This is Jeremiah, and we have our webinar today on creating section elevations. It's an interesting one. Jake and I were kind of brainstorming some webinar ideas. In the meantime, this file was up on a screen. It was from a tech support ticket, someone asking for something basically related to this. But we just kept going, that technique that we kind of ended up discussing with that person, we could build off of that, and it just kind of kept going. And then we go, this is going to make a pretty slick little technique. So I think you're really going to enjoy this. We put quite a bit of effort into getting, the right SketchUp model and getting everything together to show you this rather interesting technique that can definitely help. But definitely the point I want to stress right now is, it came from a fellow user. So, you can always reach out to us with ideas for things like webinars. Sometimes we look at trying to schedule a webinar every week for an entire year, and sometimes it takes a lot of brainstorming to eventually fill all those subjects. So definitely, we're always interested in kind of challenges you're having. Certainly for something like this, we're not in any way saying there's a button. There's not a one-click button here for create section elevation. So it's definitely not something that's just stock land effects functionality. But definitely there's a part that is played here that definitely helps out with this. So you run into these things. We're always interested in things that are a little outside the bounds of our software, other things you're struggling with, ideas for the software. You're always welcome to give those to us, and we definitely like incorporating that not only in the program but also in our webinars. So that being said, I'm going to roll this over to Jake, and reminding everyone that question and answer box is down there on the bottom, and feel free to type in anything in there, and I'll definitely get that answered and get that routed over to Jake. Otherwise, I will hand this over to Jake.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremiah. This, just to preface a little bit too, this was a pretty fun one, yet very confusing to put together a workflow based on sort of this idea. As I put it together, there was a lot of plugins and a lot of different techniques that we're going to try to cover a little bit of, sort of picking and choosing from these. So just to preface, this is definitely not an intro to SketchUp in any way, shape, or form. We can almost consider this sort of a taking off from our past webinars of our advanced SketchUp tutorials that Amanda has provided, and kind of be building off of that platform. So we're gonna briefly touch on plugins that we use in this little webinar here, but as far as actually understanding it and learning it, it is going to be somewhat intensive, and I do apologize for those that might not be able to keep up. So just know that this will be recorded for you to pause and look at some of this stuff that we're going to go over. So starting off, really what is a cross section, or what is a section elevation? And this term is used in and out of the industry in all kinds of fashions. So we're going to just sort of take a brief snapshot just so that we're all sort of on the same page about what we're trying to create. And then how we actually go and get that from what we're doing in AutoCAD. And this will obviously lead into all of our different workflows using different features within land effects and some fairly new features that might help the process along a little bit. So we'll show you some of those little techniques, and then how you actually bring that stuff back over from SketchUp as the topo or the section lines and stuff like that. So on top of all that, here are a couple plugins that we will be using a little bit, if not just mentioning. some of, and if I do mention any other ones, I will try to remember to call them out. If you have questions on them, let us know. Most of everything you see here is through the extension warehouse, so you can just search some of these plugins or by the actual creator. Some of them are not found on the extension warehouse, and you'll have to find those in other places like Sketchucation, or even on their own personal websites. So just keep that in mind. A little Googling might have to be the way you do it as well. So, but here's a little tidbit there for you. So going right into it, just a little bit of an example so that we can sort of get on the same page about what these are. And I don't have to beat this too hard, but the sections, we typically refer to those as something that is cut and you see the inside of it and only the inside of it. So that really pertains to, you can almost think of this as maybe a pillar or a wall or a footing or something like that, that you're actually slicing through, but you're only looking at that specific slice, nothing else around it. Elevations. Elevation is the outside of an object and no cuts, and it's typically just plain flat. And you can see here we have elevations of benches, or a lot of times it's referred to as the sides of houses or the front of the house or something like that. So you can say it's the north facing, it's the north elevation or something like that, and it would be considered whatever's on the north side of that building. If we go a little bit further and actually combine the two, this is really where we're going to be focusing. We're going to be focusing on section elevations. And so whether we have called them section cuts or cross sections or anything like that, a section elevation is essentially merging the two previous descriptions into one, and that is taking a cut or showing that cut line or that cross of where you're going, and then showing things that actually are past that cut plane so you can see the context of what it is. So there are several different ways that you can make these, starting from hand rendered to CAD, bringing them into Photoshop. There's so many different possibilities. So what we're going to be going over is kind of a seed to be planted, an idea to be put in your mind about what you can actually create. And what we're going to obviously show here is between Land Effects and SketchUp, since that is a fairly integrated workflow already. One thing I will mention too, obviously we do follow a couple standard guidelines about where showing a thick line for where that cut actually exists versus what is in the background. So how you can actually produce items like that where those cuts actually show. So I'm going to bump right out of here and we're going to jump right into AutoCAD. So you may have an existing site already done or a plan already done, or you might be right in the works of it. But a couple things to keep in mind. The whole overall theme here too is garbage in, garbage out. So we really need some accurate information to be able to create accurate elevations. And the best way to be able to do that is through getting your topography and having that survey points or whatever is going to be your actual base here to be able to generate that proper terrain. Because what we're able to do, if we have that information, is to be able to throw it into SketchUp and be able to generate really, really quickly an accurate, to the topography, obviously, terrain for you to then slice through to be able to see what it is actually that you're working with. A lot of times it is very hard to see what it looks like in an elevation because it's a flat plan 2D. So bringing it into 3D gives you that sense of space and really how it's going to really affect the drawing. So um, we all should be aware of the SketchUp plugin that we have through Land Effects, being able to send layers over into SketchUp and then be able to um, send the design after that. What I want to show you really quickly is how you might be able to send the information that you actually need. So whether or not you're creating an elevation that's just going to show the trees. Um, Land Effects already is setting things on the appropriate layer for what it is. So we have recently put into the system for it to recognize if you do a lay freeze and you select, whether or not you want to keep the trees or shrubs, we'll keep the trees, and you just freeze the shrubs through the drawing, and you send this design over to SketchUp by using our presentation and export the design, it's actually only going to send the trees and not the shrubs, which makes it really, really nice. So if we just go ahead and do that, we can actually just send those trees and it sends all of them. However, this is a very, very large site, and we may be only doing a cross section across one little piece, and we don't need everything. We have also added the feature to create work areas and have the ability to create a layer suffix. So as you place trees within or items within an area, that block gets that additional layer suffix, which means that anything that lands inside of this area actually gets an additional layer suffix onto this block name, which means that we can actually freeze other items and have it only respect what it is within that work area. So I'm going to show you, I've mainly got everything converted over already using that new layer system, but I also have some old layers within this work area. So I want to show you really quickly how we can actually match properties, all the trees within this work area fairly quickly. So we have under our planting, we have our match plant and match properties. What I can do is I can grab one of these trees that has the old layer name, and I can just grab him and place him just in the design. And what you'll notice is he automatically now comes in with the new layer suffix for that work area. Once I have one of him in my model, I can actually use my match properties to click on that plant and then click on the destination object, which is the old tree right there. Once I pick one of him, I can actually window across this work area, obviously making sure I'm not including any trees outside of the work area, but anything that it touches, it will convert. So if I go ahead and click on one of these guys now, you'll see that every one of these has that new layer suffix and they are the same tree. So now I can just remove him and I'm kind of good to go here. So if I use my lay freeze and I freeze all of the LP tree layers, you'll see that everything disappears except for these two work areas. This guy has its own separate work area suffix, so I'm going to freeze those trees as well as the shrubs. So really quickly you can see that I was able to really limit where I wanted these trees to come in. From here I can go ahead and I can export my design, and I can come over to SketchUp here, and I'll show you how we brought this in, and this might look a little different than you're used to, and we're going to go over that a little bit. But I do want to show really quickly that I can just import those trees right where they go. Now, this is an awesome example of things not hitting the terrain like they should, and that's because I actually have a face down on the bottom here. And so what I want to do is I want to just delete that face out because, what Land Effects is doing is obviously growing from the bottom up so that it can hit the proper terrain. So I'm just going to run import one more time, and you'll see everything pops up and it lands right on the terrain like it should. So really quickly we can start to get an idea of where we're going to be using this section cut. And if I go ahead and come right back over here, I can undo this lay freeze if I want to, or turn everything back on and run one more lay freeze, and we can do everything else except for what's in this work area, and go ahead and send him over. And so really quickly I can use the same model to see where we're going with things and import, and it'll import the brand new stuff over to where it should. It'll kind of update that selection. So you can quickly get a sense of how we're going to be running this. For the future examples that we're going to show, I'm not going to be importing the plants, so kind of apply this theory to your actual model that you will be doing. So let's go ahead and bump right over into actual sending those layers over to SketchUp here. So let me go to one more model. All right, so I want to quickly go over just a couple different plugins that we've found that may or may not work for your workflow, but they're an interesting idea. So kind of apply, maybe see how you can use these things. But essentially, we are using the SketchUp Connection, just like we were doing over here in AutoCAD. And what I did here is I actually sent, using our SketchUp Connection, sent the layers, and I actually predetermined where I want these section cuts to go. This is where I think I want them to match up for my different views. And so what I actually did is I actually sent this layer, the anno symbol layer, for that actual section cut callout, and sent him over to SketchUp along with my topography and any relative line work that I need for making that model. So if I come back over to SketchUp, you're actually going to see those lines that I've sort of cleaned up here and made through this area just as a reference point for when I need to make my section cuts. So bringing in all my terrain, I can go ahead and use the sandbox tool to be able to generate this terrain, and you'll see it chugging along the bottom, which then will create that that mesh that we need right here. And obviously we can turn off our topo line work so that you can see the actual mesh that it created. At which point I can use a couple different other sandbox tools if I want to for this. I've already set one in just as an example here, using my new favorite terrain tool, and that's Instant Roads. If you all have not seen that one or looked at that one, definitely go give it a view. Even purchase it. It is a paid, a yearly thing, but it is so worth it. And I'll show you a smaller example in just a little bit when we actually do that. But it cuts so much work out of doing this terrain modeling. It's insane. So being able to get your actual stuff, the terrain and the mesh here, we're going to do this one more time here. We will explode this line work, and let me get a terrain. These next two tools that I want to show really quickly is color by slope and color by Z. And Chris Fulmer has created these, and they are pretty slick little tools. What's interesting about this color by slope is you can start to get a sense about how steep things are. It's not going to tell you the actual percentage of slope, which which is a little bit of a bummer. And we have further ideas of expanding some tools for land effects, but for this purpose here, being able to select this face, I have the option to color by slope. And what it's going to do essentially is it's going to ask me for my lowest slope, and you can put any RGB color that you want. I'm going to go with one that I found to be fairly good contrast here. Um, so bear with me. And the highest slope value, and we're going to just leave this one as color red. And then it's going to ask how many colors do you want to show within this model to integrate how that color flows or how those slope areas are broken out. You can go really high, and it'll be a very blended color. 10 colors actually is a pretty good indicator of just picking out the most crucial spots. But just give it a second here, and what's created is to think through all the different slopes here. So just give it a second. All right, so if we turn off that layer so you can actually see, you can see that it starts giving a different color based on the more steep grades that you actually have in your terrain. It does not color anything that is purely flat. So you can see where it's just strictly flat, and as it gets a darker color, obviously there's some tweaks in our actual terrain that really show what those colors are. So obviously, again, going back to the garbage in, garbage out, actually, adjusting the contours and cleaning up this base while you run these tools is definitely going to give you different results. So this guy may not be that way in real life, so fixing that and running it again. But you get a little sense of what it does. We're going to come right over here to color by Z, and again we'll go ahead and run our sandbox really quick. And we'll select the face, and we'll just do color by Z. Now this one is different in the fact that it actually goes just from Z elevation. So what's the highest point, and we can go 255 there, and then what's the lowest point, and so we can go 255 into blue. So I want to show red as the highest and blue as the lowest. And as soon as you run that tool, this one's more of a graphical representation. It gives you a better sense about how high or low things are, which is really an interesting idea, especially if you get into some really crazy terrain and it starts to sort of blend together. This is definitely a good identifier to see how things are actually running. So as you start to model this terrain out again and then select this face, run this tool, and you can actually see how things are flowing. So that one's kind of a fun little one. Now, Topo Shaper, this is a pretty fun one. This is actually going to be how you actually create the terrain. So aside from Sandbox tool, Topo Shaper gives you a little bit more flexibility in how you're editing and adjusting these contours as they come in, sort of cleaning them up. So we're going to just go ahead and select them. I'm going to click my Topo Shaper tool. And what's interesting about this tool is it gives you some, before it creates the terrain and stuff like that, some ability to fix some of these contours. So it sees all these holes, it sees some close gaps, so it's going to fill these in automatically. And if we wanted to, we can go ahead and connect some of these into the other terrain as well and create contours for these. What's interesting is it tells you what their Z elevations are, so you can start to really go into this. I'm not going to do too much more than give you that little brief overview. But what this is now going to do is it's going to sort of generate a initial snapshot of the terrain so that we can fine tune how detailed this terrain actually gets based on the contours, and then we can accept it from there. But you can see what we're left with is somewhat of a more interesting model looking set where it's got a nice flat bottom on it, and then a cutout of where that terrain is. So we can adjust a little bit more of that detail, like I said, or we can just go ahead and generate that terrain. And now it's here for us to use. So what's cool about this and why I like this one so much, and we're going to sort of lead off from this point into just a single example really quick. Take out these trees. Just one sec. All right. So I have this same terrain right here in the model, and what we're going for now for this whole section elevation thing is how we can actually portray what this is going to look like, because I think one of the hardest things to do, and we're not telling you this is how you have to do it, but what we can tell you is to create an elevation, a section elevation from a plan view takes a lot of skill. A person that really understands topography, really can understand reading this stuff to be able to portray it down into that elevation. They have to have a good sense of space and everything to make it look correct. So what we're doing is bridging that gap again to be able to have the same accurate terrain, if not now just as accurate as the plan view, and now cut and show that elevation. So, Jer, I am going to pause just because we're going to move into the next section. Is there anything that we have pending?
We always had a couple of minor questions. One was a question on, kind of it looked like your path was up in the sky, up above the terrain, and how do you get that down? And I was saying that's part of the magic of exactly that instant road plugin. And Emmanuel just chimed in with another good question on if these were land effects plugins, but for the most part, yeah, you're showing these plugins by other authors, which are all part of just the SketchUp family of, it does require getting a lot of these different plugins from different people and kind of using them in concert together.
Yep. All right. So yeah, the hovering over in the sky is definitely something that as you bring in your line work, what you have to do to be able to drape it on top of the actual terrain and stuff like that. So what I want to show you now is somewhat of an easier way actually when you're creating that stuff. And this is just going to go by super quick and sort of very, very basic, but just to get you an idea of what this tool can do. I've got this line work right here. I'm going to go ahead and select him, and I'm going to make him a group. And I'm going to explode that guy. So what I have here is essentially a terrain that I want this path, and I want it to be sort of a meandering path around here. I can actually run this plugin, this instant road, and I have the ability to do paths and all kinds of other stuff, and set parameters to what is going to do for this path essentially. So we can drop it to the path, or we can set it to cut through, and you have all these different things. And I'm just going to run it just like this, and we're not going to do a 60-foot path. We're going to do a 25-foot path. And we can do all of this stuff. And you can see that it turned it into a curvy line there, and it draped it, and it cut it, and it filled it across. So I didn't have to do any work. That's why I get so excited about that plugin, is that without doing much more than knowing where my path is going to be, it creates a very, very reasonable look to your terrain, and you didn't have to do much more than that. The tools above and beyond that is being able to even make adjustments to the path without you know, doing more than pushing or pulling down. And you can see that I can start to move this actual sidewalk, and it actually starts to adjust the whole thing, and I don't have to edit each individual component. And so it just makes it so nice. So going to creating your actual full SketchUp model, and where you're going to want these to show these cuts and stuff, is very crucial, so that you can have an accurate, or as close to accurate, representation as possible. So and what I mean by that is, we're going to now bump right over to our, let's say, final model. And so I've done a little bit more work here in this one, and ran that tool. It was a different setting, different type of path, so it cut it into the hill a little bit, and it really gives me that sense of how I want that elevation to look. So how do I actually get those elevations now set so that we can bring them over into CAD? So you remember that we did that one export of the line that we had for that section cut, and you're going to see here, it's not in this model. Let's go back over to, that's fine, we can import it in here really quick. So I'm just going to import that symbol line, and what you'll see is that line work that came in right here, and I can select all on that same layer, which is a nice little feature, and I can go ahead and group it so that he's at least all locked in, and now I can move him above if I want to, just like that path was shown. But now I'm starting to get a sense of where I actually want to cut to show those elevations. So what I want to do is what's going to be the easiest that I've found here, and again, this is just my little workflow that I found, is you want to make sure that you have some type of reference, a reference point, to be able to put a section cut for this section tool that I'm going to show you here in a second. So either drawing a line to connect these two, or simply taking and moving these points to match up to where it should be. Now I have this other little plugin that I found, and it's called Unconnecting Lines or Curves to Walls. So it essentially takes a line and it will make a wall out of that. So I'll just do a big, large wall, and you can see that now I have a wall without having to try to make a rectangle and match it. So these walls essentially are my little section plane that I'm going to use as a temporary guide to using my section cuts. So I have a little section cut tool, and this is just a SketchUp tool. And you can hover, any face that you hover over, this is where it's going to start to do the cut. So that's why I made these walls, so that we can actually click on it, and it's going to cut that face in. So if I want to, I can go ahead and hide those walls, and I can start to see that is looking pretty good as far as what I want to be able to show. I want to show that those walls, I want to show part of the path and where it comes back down, really giving that nice elevation. And you can see that it's even cutting into these buildings a little bit. Um, so how do we actually get a view that we can use? Another little fun trick is if you right click on your section cut, you have a couple different options. One is a line view, and you can create some groups from these slices and stuff like that. But what I want to focus on is two more plugins that I found. And these plugins are relating to how this section cut functions. Because what we want to be able to do is be able to refer back to these specific sections if we need to at any given time. And the way we can do that is creating scenes. And I know Amanda has put out even a power tip that talks about using scenes and stuff like that, but what we want to do is we want to use super section. And the super section is found on the warehouse, and what this does is it will create, so we're going to call this one section 1. What it's going to do is it's going to create a scene. It's going to display everything in parallel projection, so that flat, straight-on look, and it's going to create its own layer if you want to put stuff on that layer, and it'll only be visible with that scene. So it does a lot of different things, and you're going to see now that it's zoom extents there, and I have now a section cut perfectly straight on look. It might not look good because of all the underground or the topography in other places, but we don't care about that right now. So what we now have is a really nice profile of that section elevation. And what we can do with that is right off the bat go and export this section slice. So we'll call this one section 1. And we can export it as a DWG or a PDF or JPEG, but we're going to focus on just exporting this guy out as a DWG. And I'll go ahead and open that up so you can see what it was able to create. So again, garbage in, garbage out. If that terrain is all messy and those section cuts are cutting through weird line work and stuff, you'll see how that is affecting it. So you might have to do a little bit of cleanup. But look at what you're actually getting. You're getting a very, very accurate about where each one of these things hit, and they're all to scale. So we can start doing a lot more stuff to this without worrying about if it's actually in the right spot or if it's the right size and that kind of stuff. So we're going to go into this a little bit deeper in a little bit, but what else I want to show you is this function. And so what we can do here is we can actually, I'm going to create this face right quick, close that off. Now I'm going to create another section cut just as the same example, but you'll notice that I'm using the Topo Shaper terrain, how it made that skirt on the bottom, and I'm using that for this purpose here. I'm going to go ahead and drop a section cut in. And it won't matter too much where I position it, but what I'll do is I will move him in so that you actually get a better sense of that actual terrain line. And what's nice is I have almost that ground zero or that level 0 look. So I have this really nice profile. So what I can do is I can run one other plugin, and by right-clicking on that elevation or that section, I actually have Add Section Cut Face. And what this will do is it will give you some parameters of how you want it to look. I'll keep it black. It asks you if you want to hide edges. I'm going to say no. I'm not going to lock it. And it's going to put it on the sections layer. And we'll say OK. You can see that it actually filled in that face. I mean, it's just an actual single layer here, But what's really nice about that is if we go ahead and we align view with that guy, I can actually get that guy. See if I can select him. Oh, he's selected. All right. So we're going to move him out so you can see what I just created here. So we have now a really nice profile edge line. If we want to even simply go ahead and do a align view on this guy one more time so that we're flat on, and we can go ahead and we can export this line work out. And this line work here will now be our new contours. So we can go ahead and export, and we can either do this 2D graphic, or we can do, if we wanted to, that section cut. So just as this example, you'll now see that I have this really nice elevation cut, this section elevation. And what's nice about that is if we were to dimension anything, and I'm going to be prompted with a couple things here, so give me a sec. Oops. You can see how big those dimensions actually are in this. So bumping over to a real life example, I was able to take this section that we had, I cleaned it up just a little bit, and I was able to create this. So having this type of baseline, being able to reference using our dimension tool and figuring out where we actually want to see those measurements and how high points are, we can actually start to drop in spot elevations at any one of these given points. And we can just call this one 46. And as we start to make those different points, we can then use our slope callout. And we can give any distances, between this point and that point, and see what our slopes are. So really, really quickly we can start to understand if this is actually going to work. You get a lot of information just from simply running that right over. So from here, what else can we do with it? So I was able to create that section slice, and I was also able to send, if I wanted to, a 2D graphic. So the way that that worked was, if I go ahead and come over here, whatever you have visible here, you can actually send and export as a 2D graphic. And what that's going to do is it's going to either send that graphic as a JPEG, or it's going to send it as line work. And that line work resulted in this. And I did clean up, that bottom extra hanging out stuff through the model. But being able to now see that context behind that main section cut is going to be really powerful as you start to bring in trees or what you're actually going to be showing, so that you can see what that context is, because this is somewhat of a false sense of what is there in the actual model, because you have all this house behind. This is just showing where it's cut through. So being able to send that extra line work over, or we actually even exported that as a JPEG or a PDF, and I attached it as an XREF. And so you can start to see that we can actually even have, I'll make it a little bit darker for you to see. we can actually even have that picture in the background as a reference so that you have more of a clean look. So if we were to print preview this guy, you can see that we have our nice line work as well as that picture that's sort of cut in behind. Or again, just like this guy's showing, um, with that extra line work that way. So one other option that I wanted to show before we sort of moved on was with our trees turned on. So this guy is showing essentially as we did our little export from that work area and showed the trees in our terrain, um, we were able to at least give a context that way if we didn't want to place any CAD trees or 2D people or something like that. I mean, we still can at this point, but it starts to really give you that sense of that elevation. And I honestly didn't have to do that much work. Um, it's definitely helping with that 3D concept and that perspective where things should land versus keeping everything at this main layer. So I do want to show you now how you may or may not want to actually transfer this guy in relation to his plan view. So Jer, I will stop here if there's any questions.
No, I've got a couple simple questions I was able to get answered, so you can keep on going. This is really fascinating.
All right, cool. So now we did our little exercise with where these section cuts were going, and we did our little work area thingy here. Um, Now, how do you actually figure out if you're going to not use the SketchUp plants? Let's say we just wanted to use some nice CAD elevation symbols for our plants and for our people. How can you actually portray where those land on that elevation? So what I want to show you here is we're going to go ahead and just unfreeze all of our other stuff really quick. And we're going to use a UCS. We're going to create a new UCS. And what we're able to do is essentially make it for each one of our areas. Now, one thing I need to put in here is a little section guy. So we can go to our discipline graphics or we can go to our site callouts. But grab another elevation, and we wanted this guy, you know, wherever he landed, he was over this way. So he's detail number 2 on L102. Okay, so I have my two different section view cuts. What we can do with our new UCS tool is we can actually, and restore UCS, we can actually set up a view based on where we're actually going to be cutting that from. So I put an insertion point and I'm going to specify an x-axis direction. I'm going to use this line again since he's going to be really where that guide was where we cut, and I'm going to then position my x or my y above that line. Now it recognizes that I have a work area here, so I am going to assign this UCS to this work area. Now you're going to see that now my plan's rotated and it's perfectly, up and down for this view. And I can do the same thing, and I believe I have set one up for this guy already. So this was my section cut that I'm doing for this view. So looking at the cut this way, and then looking at the cut this way. So really quickly we can move back and forth with our restore UCS. If I want to see a list of what my UCSs are, you can see that there are my different work areas. So once I have these different UCSs set, I can go ahead and I can bring in essentially the exported line types or the section types that I actually created. So maybe we grab this guy and we're going to copy with base point and we'll choose this end and we'll come over here. So now that I'm set up in this view here, I can go ahead and paste, and you should see that this really does match up exactly where it should in relation to this view. And we can go ahead and use our crosshairs to align it to however we want to. But basically, this is that process that you probably were doing manually and just drawing those lines down right where all those trees hit. And we can do that same thing. However, we were playing around with this idea and it seemed like a pretty fun one. So being able to have these work areas obviously now has additional functionality where we can actually highlight specific types of trees within that work area. And if we want to, we can go ahead and take that highlight and we can turn it into a selection. And with that selection, I can go ahead and copy those guys down, and I'll just hit F8 to lock it down, and I'm going to drop them just right there. I'm going to go ahead and do that same thing. I don't really have any shrubs, but I'll throw a couple shrubs in there. Let's see which ones make most sense. Yeah, we'll take those guys. So we'll copy. We'll drop those guys down here. And I'm not going to go that far because they're kind of behind the building, so I can just remove what I don't need. Now this is the fun part. We can leave these here if we want to, or you can actually find just one given tree here. We'll look at his properties and see what his position is. So 759 feet negative. So we'll take all of those guys and we'll take his Y position and we'll do negative 759 feet and hit enter. And you'll see they all line up straight. So that gives us a really nice sense about where they're actually hitting. And we can do the same thing here. So I'll look at his properties. 879. So we'll go ahead and highlight all those. Negative 879. And get those lined up. So, we can clean this up if we want to, or we can then just simply go into our plan graphics. So go to our site under our elevation graphics here, and we can drop people in, we can drop our trees, stuff like that, to start to get a sense about what is going on here. So place a couple people. I can even toggle through. We'll have this guy down here. Okay, and then we can start dropping in, obviously, some trees and pick one that is going to represent what type of tree that you're going to put in. But you can see that we can at least pinpoint with our crosshair right where that tree is going to land. So I can just drop him in and we'll scale him up to whatever he should be. And if I want to, I'll grab a couple other trees if that's what the symbol is depicted. But we'll go ahead and just drop in him here. And you can start to see that I can line up really quickly where those trees are going to go. Now, again, the problem is, where do these trees lay in relation to this line? It's a lot further back, so there is going to be some tweaking that may need to be done, but at least really quickly we can grab this stuff and figure out where it's going to go in relation to where all of these symbols are. So we can go back over to our different layout, and you can start to see, if we were to do a print preview of this guy, go past that guy sorry. Preview him. You can start to see we have a fairly decent section elevation that's starting to be created. Um, I'm going to show one last little fun thing that if we were just to simply turn on our hatch color, you're going to see that all of our stuff is rendered already. So just that quickly, we can see what type of section elevation that would look like rendered. So, it is a very workable process. And if Jared, there's any other comments that people might have, let's go ahead and take them.
Had a really good comment on that. It shows that there was a lot of work behind this, and he just wanted to get a sense for how long did it, actually take for us to get this prepped, and yeah, obviously, yeah, we did have some time
Okay.
spent on this, but it was getting the technique down, and now that we have the technique figured out, you're basically going at real time.
Yeah,
I don't know if you have any.
let's show a real time one right here. Essentially, it was a lot of work. I'm not gonna lie, and the only reason it was a lot of work is because I had to make so many different copies to show all the different steps. So don't let that you know get you down here. So why don't we just do one really quick, and we're gonna drop in an elevation section elevation cut right here. And I'm going to go ahead, and this has not been built out at all. So, I'm going to move this to where I want it. I can go ahead, if I want to, I can select him, do my super section, and call this section 2. Great. We are now parallel projection, and we're seeing everything as it's cut. So now, if I want to, from here, I can if I want to, I can either do the make faces on this to fill in these black, but that's not going to really matter over into AutoCAD. So we can just go ahead and export the section slice. We'll call him section 2.1. And I will grab him real quick. I don't know where he went. There he is. Finding him on my desktop, sorry. All right, so now we have just created this section cut. And yes, now we go in here and we do a little bit of cleanup. So whatever that would take, I can go ahead and run AutoCAD commands to trim out stuff or add stuff. Again, stopping where we want to with everything, we'll call it that we only wanted to really cut through to there. So I already have my section elevation line work now. What again is really nice is I can run the land effects tool super join to click on a line to stitch everything together to wherever it can, so that at least I have some full lines that I can do stuff to. So at this point, I mean, heck, if we wanted to, we can go ahead and drop in, if we didn't have like a plan ready and we just wanted to see maybe what it would look like with some stuff. Absolutely, we can just go ahead and come in here and drop in trees wherever we want to. Go ahead and toggle through, get a couple of those guys in there, these guys, drop something over here. We'll go ahead and throw in a vehicle. This was this firefighter's house or something. So at this point, I can again turn on my site color tool and everything's already colored. If I wanted to show anything else, maybe this was a planter bed and we wanted to show the elevation of dirt. There, we just did that. If I wanted to show what uh, those distances were here, go ahead and drop him in. So that's 5 feet. This is, I mean, you can just do anything and everything. Everything is already scaled. Everything is live. So at any given point, if we wanted to then run what the slopes were, and we can call this level 0, and you can go ahead and figure out what these distances are here, simply by doing distance. See, that's 6 inches, and this is a foot. So to run our spot elevations, go, this is 1, and this is 0, and then run our slope call out against these two to know this is what our slope percentage is. So, I mean, yes, it was a lot of prep, but no, it doesn't take a lot once you know the time. Anything else?
Great way to end it. And I hope everybody did enjoy this and keep those ideas coming and have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you, guys.